Hey everybody, this is Tyson.
And Logan.
And you're listening to Dad, Bods, and Beards podcast. It's a show that gives you a fresh look on being a father, a husband, and honestly, a man being in today's world.
For people who want to have a good time, laugh, and be uplifted, thanks for subscribing and listening. Now for the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Dad, Bods, and Beards. We've got a special one for you. Get your hand off my leg. That's one way to start it. If you can't tell, we are back into the guest configuration. We've got our buddy Brad here in studio with us, and we're going to talk a little bit more kind of about why Brad's here. But before we get started, we talked last week about our new sponsor, Mountain Ops. We were a little excited. We went on for like 5 minutes talking about Mountain Ops, but today I want to talk about one thing that I'm using all the time. I actually am using it quite a bit, which is the hydrate. We touched it a little bit last week, but I found I like putting it in sparkling water, and it makes like little pineapple. Like these are the pineapple ones. It makes like little pineapple soda. I could put it in club soda, but I think that'd probably defeat the purpose.
So I personally like the lemonade or the lemon lime. Yeah. Pineapple's good. However, I will say this: we have the Brita, and we just pour it.
Oh, dude, that's a good idea.
And so it's like ice cold, and then you put it in like one of those what are they called? What are those nice cups that my wife loves?
Tumblers.
Stanley.
The Stanley tumbler things.
Yeah.
And it keeps
not
the
sponsored by Stanley.
Yeah.
Unless you want to.
But it keeps it super, super cold, and I just love it.
Yeah. So basically.
Oh. I take one of these to the gym.
Yeah.
So after I have my pre-workout, which is Ignite, I'll put this in the gym. I'll put this in the Stanley too.
So like 80 to 90% of everyone out there, we're all dehydrated. Hydrate is basically a specific blend of vitamins and electrolytes that are going to just recharge your system, get you hydrated, get you pumping, whether you're out on the gym, you're at work, you're on the trail. Give it a shot. Use code DADBODS at checkout.
Fun fact.
Get 20% off.
Fun fact. They use the same minerals I use in my beard oil.
Ionic inland sea minerals. That's why we like them. So, without further ado, Brad, thanks for hanging out, man.
Yeah, man. Love you guys.
Yeah. So Brad is a personal friend of mine. He's a coach. He helps me business-wise. We're working on a huge thing right now, a huge deal, and
with Copper Johns.
With Copper Johns, and when everything is official, we'll announce kind of what's happened. And Brad has been playing a very integral role with it, and I'm really looking forward to our relationship moving forward and growing and all that kind of stuff. And he is very humble. He's very kind. He's one of those people that you just want to hang out with because he makes you feel good about yourself. Oh, and he'll laugh at your jokes. And
is that like a tactic like to get people to like you, or do you actually?
We're going to talk a bit about this.
Yeah.
But no, and so we wanted him on. I've been talking to him, and we wanted him on. And so today I really wanted to talk about the power of forgiving ourselves and forgiving others, because we deserve happiness. And if you guys are following my personal Instagram account, with my account.
Yeah.
It's an inside
social
joke.
Media.
It's because he always goes, well, guys, my account.
I don't say it like that. You say it like that. Like if I'm trying to specify the difference between the 13 different accounts that I pretty much manage, I'm like, well, on my social media. And then you started always.
And I'm like, well, my social media.
my papa drives an Aston Martin.
No, but I don't even know where I was. Oh, but I'm a huge proponent. I've been talking a lot about promoting self-happiness, like just being able to not rely on others to make yourself happy. Yeah. And because that's a huge thing for me, because I'm a people pleaser. And so I've been really trying hard to make myself better, and wanting to help others because I want to help them, not because I feel like they're not going to like me if I, that type of thing. And if someone's mean to me or hard to me, I can still love them and all this kind of stuff and still feel good about myself. And so that's really big. And so I kind of want to talk about that today with you, because you're really big on self-help and all that kind of stuff.
All that mindset.
So introduce yourself to everybody who's listening.
Yeah, my name is Brad Brockbank. I have a company called the U of U, which is not the University of Utah. Named it when I started back in Washington, and so it wasn't a big deal. But then I moved to Utah, and everyone's like, "You don't own the University of Utah."
You're like,
I'm
that
like,
you know of.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. One of the guys that lays below the radar. No, so University of U, and I work with high functioning executives, and a lot of times you find out, as what you guys work with, they're pursuing that success to prove something. They've like, there's something empty inside, and they're like, if I just reach a certain level, if I just get to this place, then I'll be good enough. And and I also work with another demographic of people that are very successful, and they want to just maintain the money that they've made and not screw it up, right? They want to make sure they're strong here, they're strong in their relationships. So there's kind of two big areas that I really focus on, and I'm very fortunate to get to work with incredible men.
You know what's really cool? This is like not the topic we're talking about today, but first time I talked to him, he's like, "You need to create a board." I'm like, "Well, I'm not big enough to have a board. Like I'm not GM or Ford or anything."
Oh, like a board of directors.
Yeah, and he's like, "No, it's like that's because I have so many ideas. You have a buttload of ideas too."
Yeah.
And basically, he's like, "No, you just throw these ideas off at them, and then they can say that's a good idea, that's a bad idea, or anything like that, because they're a different industry. They can help you and see different points of view and what's good, and then also they can refocus you on the certain plan that you want to go." And I'm like, "What?" Like it just shocked me. I'm like, "Why have I never thought of that?"
You see that as something like you probably should. You're like, "Oh, I'm not big enough, or I can't, or whatever." Versus you in your experience, you're like, "No.
That's how
I'm
you
telling
get
you,
big.
this is the way you get." Yeah.
Game changer.
So
Yeah.
it kind of like takes the self-doubt out of the equation a little bit. Or
Yeah,
I guess maybe you help address it.
And then no, that's totally it. Is like, hey, is this a good idea?
Yeah.
And you've got these people that you look up to, that you're working with, have been successful, and they say, well, have you thought about this or this? And what if you did it that way? Or they're like, wow, this is really genius. Like,
Sure.
Holy cow. I mean, I sit kind of on the Copper John's board, and
Absolutely. No, you do. He for sure
and,
does.
Yeah.
So the other day he was like, hey, we're going to go talk to, I won't say the name, but a very important individual. And he's like, if you kind of want to come, it's cool. I was like, I probably should be in that
Yeah,
meeting.
you're like, I was going to anyways, but yeah.
I have a hard time asking for help, and that's another
Yeah.
thing I put out on my post. But it's just like I have a hard time because I don't know, am I asking too much?
Right.
Because I don't want to ask too much.
But this is one thing that I think that we're learning together at the same time. One with you with Copper Johns, and then my involvement with Copper Johns, and then Dad Bods together, is we're learning, and this is coming from relationships like with Sean Finnegan and with you, is just that, and literally a podcast that I was on the other day, realizing that like if you don't ask for help from people that know something better than you, or know something, know more about a subject or something than you, then you're gonna have a heck of a harder time learning it or reaching that next level, right? So I feel like we've been experiencing a lot more success, I think, faster than we would within both companies.
100%.
Had we not, started working with you, going to lunch, and it's just kind of like you're bringing in all this extra expertise of like, hey, Tyson, this is great, but take that 47-page doc and move it down to 2.
That took me forever too.
So, okay, quick story. I'm not going to say the name or whatever yet, but like, obviously, down the road, you'll get to know who's like stuff that's happening. But we go to lunch. You know what story I'm going to tell too.
I do.
Yeah.
So we go to lunch, and we're me, Tyson, Brad.
Well, you
and
can say we're meeting with an investor.
Yeah, an investor, and we're talking about a bunch of stuff. Super cool dude, and it's all pretty much done deal. And Tyson gets to go to the bathroom.
I didn't know you were going to talk about that.
This was like, that's a good thing the deal was already done because your pants fell down.
I mean, they didn't drop. I mean, they weren't.
I'm just like, but the funny thing is because you've been exercising, you've been calorie counting, you've been like getting in better shape, so you're down like 35 pounds, but your pants are still the same size. And so the best part is like, good part is the investor is also a good buddy now, and it just, the pants drop, and it just was you go off to the bathroom, and I just was like, do I do damage control or do we just laugh about this? But,
well, I just felt sorry for the women behind us. I'm like,
yeah, it's a good thing you wear really big flannel shirts too.
Seriously. Hopefully there was nothing they got to experience. It's like one of my like 1990
Yeah, because men.
Sorry for those holes.
Men never. We never get rid of the underwear. But no,
that's
but
from high school.
But on that note, I mean, it was on the more serious side. That was a really cool experience to be a part of, because I mean, I mean, getting to kind of sit and be a fly on the wall as we're talking about all this stuff, and your expertise being brought in, and our new friend / investor's friend, or his expertise being brought in, it's just like a whole nother step up that I think it's a whole new world for us.
So everyone understands. I made this. He asked for questions like a performer, and he said, "Hey, I need a sales pitch deck." Is basically what it was. But I did a novel.
Yeah, you wrote a book.
I did. Like he asked for a lot of information. I'm like, oh yeah, here.
A lot of information.
And then what's fun is then now we're doing this again, and he helped me immensely. Then I asked him a question, and this is what I like about him. He's like, I don't know how to do it, but we'll find out.
Yeah.
Because there's some things that he hasn't experienced in it, but I'm like, that's awesome. Like I can trust him because he's honest.
So what led you to this line of work?
So actually, years back, it's probably, well, I have the typical story of involvement with pornography and struggles there, and that chased me around from the time I was about 10 years old until 27 or 28, right in there. And I had an experience. My wife, as I was open with her, if I had a struggle or setback or things, but I always viewed it as just an issue.
Yeah.
And not as an addiction. And it got to a point where I thought, gosh, if I just tell my wife, hey, if I have another struggle, I want you to leave. I want you to take the kids. I want you to go. It's the only thing that'll kick me in the teeth hard enough. And that's not how addiction works. You can't just say, oh, I'm going to set this really awesome trap for myself that I'll stay away from. And so I ended up having another setback. And for the first time in my marriage, I thought, maybe I'll just lie. Maybe I'll just live the lie at this stage and not tell her. And tried to sit with that for about a month, and it just ate me alive. So finally came clean with her about it. She, through the grace of God, was so kind and just said, I'm not leaving you. And she said, I'm going to stay by your side, but we're going to do this different. She said, I want you to join an addiction recovery program. And I was like, oh, that's for like addicts. But at this stage, I realize I'm counting my lucky stars. And so I'm like, I'll do whatever. That's fine. So I go and I show up and literally started a lifetime changing process. And in the course of about a year, I was able to really learn some amazing techniques and tactics that helped me get control of my urges and all things like that. And I found I had a really good knack for helping other people realize things that they weren't seeing, parts that they were missing. And so at the end of the group asked me if I would be a facilitator for them. I stuck around for another 5 years. And at the end of these 5 years, or somewhere within that, close to the end, I had like 16 people calling me on a daily basis as their trusted advisor.
Wow.
And it was a full-time job for free. And my wife was like, you're not getting your job done. You're not able to do these things. She's like, you got to figure something out. So we just laid out a plan, and I started charging $50 a month for my coaching. And I went from 16 down to 2 guys that were willing to pay that for me, and slowly grew it from there. And yeah, now today I charge a lot more than that.
Good for you. Good for you. See, that's inspiring to me, of kind of like taking that hits home for me a lot too, of taking something that almost broke you.
Yeah.
Right. Or even broke you to a point where you felt the need to start fixing things.
Truly.
And then found out how you could use that experience to then help people and like pay it forward. And now it's something that you support your family off of.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Like that's like, a win, like all the way up the ladder. So I love that.
So this kind of hits a topic. What I really want to talk about today is like embracing happiness. And so what was it really just that moment in time where you felt so guilty? You're like, I got to change my life. Like what caused, like, when did you personally decide I need to be happy? I need to get over this. I need to forgive myself.
It's kind of interesting because as you look back at Brad Brockbank and my whole life, I was the all-star kid. Mm-hmm. Like everybody was like, oh, Brad Brockbank, that guy's going to be a millionaire someday. And I like really leaned into that. I was really good and well-spoken with adults. I could anything I took on, I was really, really good at. And earlier before the show, we kind of talked a little bit about how some of these guys are so driven to have success, and that if they attain a certain level of success, then maybe they'll be good enough. Right. And that was me in this world of like trying to impress everybody. You know, I got my Eagle Scout done. Like everything was done by the time I was like 14.
Wow.
Except for my service project. And I waited and waited, and I was looking for like the ultimate service project. And then the homeless shelter in Vancouver, Washington got burned down on Christmas Eve by a angry guy that was denied access because he was drunk.
Oh, gosh.
Burned the whole thing down to the ground. And I was like, hey, this is my moment. I can rebuild the homeless shelter. And I took on a way, way larger project than I ever should have. But that was because I wanted to be recognized. I wanted to be this amazing guy.
Mm-hmm.
So in that pursuit of trying to be good enough and trying to do things big enough, there was this happy version that everybody knew. But back inside, I was constantly struggling with this addiction and trying to force those voices that say, yeah, but when everyone's saying, oh, Brad's so awesome. And I'm like, yeah, but if you knew the real me, you wouldn't say that. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And struggling with that, I think getting to the point where my wife finally was like, hey, we're going to do this a different way. It was inside of that program, and really inside of reaching out and connecting with other men who everyone in that room had the same issue, right? So I had nothing to hide or to be embarrassed about. And that was a big realization for me probably a couple months in, like, hey, we're all here. Because I had this shame going to the meetings. And somebody said something to that degree of like, you guys all realize we're all here for the same reason. And if you're carrying any shame, let it go, because we're all on the same boat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that was a huge moment for me in shifting my energy and my direction. And it allowed the happy part of me to start taking the front seat all the time. And I was learning, of course, a lot about the mindset and different techniques to stay focused on what I wanted in life versus what I didn't want. And so through all of that, I was able to start being much, much happier and having results with my coaching. And yeah.
So it was kind of there was definitely like, I want to say like a switch, right? Because like everyone always, we just kind of roughly talked about this last week of like looking for like that one thing that's going to save you, like
right,
whether it's an
that
outside
moment.
thing or whatever. But it was almost the way at least I'm picking it up from you is that it's the consistent process of seeing the problem, recognizing the problem, addressing the problem, and then like looking for a solution, and then it's trial and error, right?
Yeah. Think about Michael Jordan for a moment. You know, we talk about coaching all the time, and here's I was on another podcast. I said, I'm going to say something very controversial. Sure. We'll see what the comments say. But Michael Jordan, in my world, he's the GOAT, like best of all time. But he had a coach, right?
Mm-hmm.
He never didn't have a coach.
Mm-hmm.
Look at Tiger Woods, this amazing golfer. He's got a coach. And as they became who they are at the top of their game, it didn't happen overnight where all of a sudden this one coaching session they said, hey, you know, if you change your stance or you shoot this direction or like, and all of a sudden they get it. It's over consistent time and effort and working and having those check-ins and things like that really build and create this happy version. It's not going to happen in a moment.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen in life that way. It doesn't happen in our minds that way. It's a process of consistency and finding reasons to maintain consistency.
So with your history, I know for me, like as I've gone through losing my job or needing food stamps or being on government assistance when I found out, you know, my youngest daughter was being pregnant after not my youngest daughter, my wife being pregnant with our youngest daughter. I've learned so much more empathy. So, have you felt like that has helped your coaching, like empathy? Like, do you have a lot of it? Like, for me, I have a hard time just judging anyone anymore just because I'm like, I have no idea what they're going through, but I know what they're going through. It's got to be rough.
Yeah, in fact, I think that's one of the major techniques that I want your listeners to understand when they're going through the struggle. the struggle has an interesting effect on us, right? It creates anger, it creates angst, it creates this why do they have it and I don't? And it can come out in all sorts of formats and different things. And so when we're dealing with those struggles internally in our own mind, it can create anger.
Mm-hmm.
If you can turn that and start telling stories. So, as people are listening and they're hearing all this story, and I'm this awesome coach and I'm leading people. Guys, I'll tell you, I've been married now 23 years. For the first probably 18 years of my marriage, we were paycheck to paycheck. I remember sitting on the floor with my wife with no furniture in our house, holding her while she wept, saying, how are we going to make our bills? How is this going to come together? And I had nothing. I had no answers. I've lost my job. I've been, we counted up a few years back. I've held over 32 W-2 jobs in our 23 years of marriage, and we've moved over 30 times.
Wow.
Yeah. Like U-Haul moves. I'm not talking like, hey, we moved from one apartment to the other one because it's better. Mm-hmm. These are like load up the U-Haul, move to a new city moves. And I was just trying to find myself when I was young, and I can totally relate with a lot of your followers and listeners, because I know where they're at as far as that pain, that feeling like, when's it going to work out for me? And guys, just keep going.
Yeah.
Like keep finding reasons to be positive. Keep creating reasons. I love the old saying that if you try to find the time, you never will. You have to create it. The same holds true in reasons to be happy. If you're just trying to find something, it's not going to happen.
But I feel like, this is not to be a devil's advocate or anything, but I feel like I have been in a place, and occasionally I find myself still in that place where it's just deep despair, deep depression. Like, my family would be better if I'm not here. Not like attempting to take away my life, but more leaving.
Right.
Yeah, disappearing.
Disappearing.
Just leave, right.
And so it's hard when you just want to disappear. You don't want to talk to anyone. You don't want to feel anything. You just want to literally just be numb because it hurts so much. Mm-hmm. And you don't even know necessarily why. You just feel this way. So what do you tell people and how do you coach people, and how do you help people who are feeling that way at that moment? Like for me, I was that way about a month ago with Logan, but I didn't tell him until after the fact, and he was ticked. But I'm just like, but when you're in that moment, you don't want to talk about it or talk to anyone, period.
Right.
So how do you get over that and move forward from that?
Yeah, it's a hard place to be, and I wish I could say that there's just this magic technique.
I wish there wasn't there?
Right?
Yeah.
But I think there is this piece inside of you that you do. Like you said, you weren't looking to kill yourself.
No.
But there are many out there that get to that point where the despair is so dark and so deep and alone.
Well, Logan's 7-year anniversary was a couple of days ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, the 16th. Yeah.
Yeah, it's real, and it's painful.
Mm-hmm.
And you feel like there's nobody. In fact, you feel like people would be relieved.
Oh yeah.
If you just ended it.
We talked about this. We had a girl on the show named Danny. Her husband died by suicide 5 years ago, and she talks about how she would take every burden her husband felt he had over the burden that he left her with their children. But yeah, October 16th, 2017 was the night that I had a full mental break. Didn't realize I'd been struggling with bipolar for quite a few years. Felt like that was going to be my last night, and thankfully ended up voluntarily in the back of a police car on the way to.
You voluntarily?
Yeah, voluntarily. I didn't. It took some coaxing.
That's what I mean, though. So you had someone there.
Her name is Officer Katie Cooley. Actually, she's been married. She got married, I believe. She has a different last name now, but we actually keep in touch over email, because on the way to the emergency room, she was the person I needed to tell me and reassure a lot of the things that my wife had been telling me for years. But she told me, she's like, hey, I want you to get a hold of me in 5 years and tell me how good you're doing. And I got to do that a couple years ago, and we've stayed in touch, which is really cool. But we know those feelings, right? We know the feeling of like, dude, gorgeous wife. amazing personality. I say this all the time, and she hates that I say this, that if you have a problem with my wife, you are undoubtedly the problem. And I have 2 beautiful children. I had, you know, I could list a million reasons why my life was worth saving, but at that time I couldn't see it.
Yeah.
Didn't want to see it. Felt like I was bringing everybody down. Right. And I want to touch back kind of on that note to something you'd said. You said holding your wife as she wept and not knowing what was going on, and, you know, moving after moving after moving, trying to find yourself. And that's one thing that I realized in my whole process, is that I think that men, we do this as well as fixers, is that we're trying to like fix our situation by fixing ourselves. And this isn't a slam to anybody. I did this a lot myself. Is I think our wives and our partners, they end up in the background a lot.
Mm-hmm.
They end up hanging on for dear life because, I mean, whether you call it
in survival mode.
Yeah, in survival mode. And then sometimes that leads to PTSD, that leads to trauma responses and things like that. Like, my wife still works through quite a few because of some of the things that I did when I was extremely manic, when I was extremely depressed, when I was unhinged. And one of the biggest things that means a lot for my wife and is a non-negotiable for me now is if I provide a level of security to her that she didn't have before, that's not changing. Like,
yeah.
So that was a same thing. Like, we bounced around a lot of different apartments, a lot of, you know, like, income was never steady for a long time. And so one of my biggest things that I try to focus on, and I'm sure I could do a heck of a lot better, is there was a time that I remember my wife was crying because we couldn't even afford a couple of cute little throw pillows to put on our couch we got for free. And that hurt a lot at the time, that like having that conversation, like that would be one cute little thing that would make her feel like our home was more of a home. Yeah. And I couldn't even do that. And throw pillows are
$15.
$15.
Yeah.
So to me now, and this may seem super petty, if my wife wants some cutesy thing for the house, I don't even care what the price is. I'm like, you want it, you get it. Because, and she's insanely frugal, like way more frugal than I'm. Like, we go out to eat and I'm like, oh, get everything. She's like, no, we're not doing that. But to me, so I like that you brought that up, because that hit home a lot of like, I remember those days, and we're still in the thick of it at times. Right.
Right. Yeah.
But to me, that's one thought that's been on my mind a lot lately is we talk all the time, especially this show's catered towards guys, of like, you know, work towards your situation, work towards, you know, bettering yourself, work towards all these different things. But at the same time, you know, remember who's been in your corner the whole time. Remember who's been hanging on for dear life, you know, if that situation still applies to you. And so I'm glad you brought that up, and that kind of hit me right in the chest.
Yeah. And on that note, I think going back to your question of like, what do you do? Right. And I think there's kind of a 2-part answer. One, it's the an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? If you can connect, I would say today, what's where you're at and how you've been able to grow is because you have connection. Yeah. You've gotten out. You've worked hard to be able to create those. But like you had mentioned earlier, when you're in the thick of it, like the last thing you want to do is burden somebody with your problem and reach out. But guys, if you're in that place right now and you are struggling, take it from somebody who talks to people over and over. I don't care if you're broke and have hardly anything. Obviously, you have enough faculty to be able to listen to this podcast, so you've got something. But the moment that you reach out and tell somebody, I promise that will be the catalyst for a change in your life. It will be the moment that will be able to help you. Because I can't think of anybody that I have in my life that if I reached out and said, hey, I'm just in a dark place and I need somebody. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'd use those words. I'm in a rough spot and I just need to talk. Yeah. If you can muster those words up, it will literally change the trajectory of where you're at and can start a process, that process that we were mentioning earlier, that it doesn't happen in just a moment. Yeah. It's a climbing out of that hole, but they will help you and you won't do it alone.
I will say this, that a couple weeks ago, my life is really hectic. And so sometimes Candace will be asleep on the side, and I'll be playing a game on my phone because I just need time.
Yeah, decompressing.
Decompress.
Yeah, because
exactly.
like yesterday we're from 7 a.m. to 2 a.m. Like that's just what I did. And I'm grateful for it that I have the privilege to be able to do that. But anyway, point being, a couple weeks ago, I'm sitting here playing. I'm like this, playing on my phone. Next thing I know, and it hits my face, and I call Logan. So I didn't butt dial, my nose dial,
Was
my
that
face
what
dial.
it was?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
And then, but it's like midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. I hang up. I'm like, oh crap.
No.
Next thing I go, ring, 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 and Logan's calling, and I'm just like that's
4 times in a row, dude.
yeah.
Like
I'm putting it down. I'm tired, but I didn't know he called afterwards, and I'm just like I felt bad I didn't answer and say, hey, it was just a face dial.
I'm sitting there literally. I remember I wake my wife up, and I'm like, do I go? Like, I was like, I mean, you live an hour away.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, I was like trying to figure out what I do. I'm like, do I put my pants on? Do I take off right now or whatever? But I had this feeling of like everything was fine, and that you would.
But I just have someone in my corner like that, and it hasn't. I've always had my wife. Don't get me wrong.
Totally, absolutely, but it's different.
But it's when you have someone like who's gone. I don't know. Him and I are a lot similar, but we're also a lot not alike. We're a lot alike.
The word is different. Yeah.
Shut up. It's true.
Yeah.
You good with words. Me
This is why you're utilizing Brock.
Yeah. This is why he presents everything. No, now I lost my train of thought.
Yeah.
But anyway, point being is I have someone that I didn't know I needed, and it was all because of connection. And then all of a sudden, next thing I know, we meet Sean, and then we meet you, and then we meet Brock, and then we meet Trevor, then like all these people, and it's like it's really changed. Or Corey, it's really changed the projection of not just professionally but personally, and it's funny because they say give me your top 5 friends and I'll show you who you will be, and I'm like, holy crap, that legit is a thing. Yeah, because now I'm talking to these really, really influential, high business minded people, and they're good people, not just that, but they're really good people, and I'm like,
yeah.
So
are we good people?
So with that, actually, I kind of a question kind of come up. So with that, like kind of being new for us, kind of like starting to run in a much more influential, like positive vibe crowd. That like, which is I will say is very shocking.
Social media.
Which is it's very different for me of like to be integrating so much with so many people that are like, what can I do for you? Before they think about themselves. Like that's something that's that's what I'm saying. But it's like Sean obviously doesn't associate himself with people who aren't of this similar, like, what value can I provide you first, right? And that's everything I'm seeing, like, from you and from everyone else we've been hanging out with. But one thought I know that you struggle with from time to time, and I do as well, of kind of like I'm not good enough to be here.
Right.
I'm not good enough to be like, these guys are good for me, but am I good for these, like this group of
syndrome.
People? Yeah. Like same thing.
You're like a mentor at iHub now. You're a mentor at iHub now.
Yeah.
And Courtney, her sister, and a couple of people was like, hey, you need to be. I'm like, and you've even said that. I'm like, I'm not there
no,
yet.
You totally need
but you know what I mean? It's just like, like these guys, their business is just like I am. Like,
but I've never really experienced imposter syndrome to that extent, to where kind of like, with the mental health battles, especially with bipolar, it's really good at making you feel way more important than you are, right? And it's almost a little bit narcissistic at times. And so as I've battled through and worked through a lot of those habits and personality traits that come from years of bad habits, now feeling like, part of me is like, I feel like we should be a part of this, and feeling like, I kind of moving up with it. But then there's that dark part of your mind of like, no. But you remember when you used to do this? Remember when you used to be this guy? Like, yeah. What if they knew this about you? And it's kind of like, well, they do. Like, stop making me feel so bad about it. So it's like that imposter syndrome. So how would you handle that of somebody who feels like they've made it to a certain point, but then maybe has a little bit of a backslide, feeling like maybe they don't deserve it?
It's really simple. Well, it's not simple, but the answer is a simple one.
Sure.
It's always simple, but hard to do.
It's hard. Yeah, exactly. The truth of the matter is we're all you guys, I am mentoring multimillionaires. I work with billionaires, people who are playing at the highest level of the financial world.
It's not me. Just so you know. Just in case you thought it was me.
Yeah.
They all have it, guys. They all are dealing with that same like imposter syndrome, like why me? Or if you knew the truth, if you knew the skeletons in my closet, you wouldn't be putting me up on this stage. In fact, one that I just recently was talking with somebody about, I won't say the name, but he was receiving an award just recently, and he's done incredible things, blessed so many lives. And in sharing some things, he just said, if you guys knew the truth, you wouldn't have me. In his mind, this is what he's thinking. If you knew the truth, you wouldn't have me up here getting this award because of this, and this. That's all in his head in the moment of receiving this award that he was nominated by peers and other people to receive. And he's got all the money in the world. And yet here he is doubting himself and feeling those feelings. They're real. And I think when we start to realize that, like, okay, maybe everybody's having a little bit of that struggle and kind of going through that, there is narcissism, and there are certain conditions where people, they think they're the man and they're the world and they created it and whatever. But I think the vast majority are in a place where they are struggling so badly. Even when you start to peel back the layers of a narcissist, the condition that put them into that state really truly was a feeling of inferiority, and I'm not good enough.
Interesting. Yeah, because I think that's one of those categories people don't really have a lot of forgiveness or empathy for people who are, almost like clinically narcissistic, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So one thought that keeps popping up while you're talking that is kind of the principle of forgiveness, and we touched on this a little bit ago. So do you think that make things like imposter syndrome come because maybe like a two-part thing where we have a hard time forgiving ourselves because as a society, we're pretty much almost like taught not to forgive other people for their past. Right. I mean, you look at social media, cancel culture is a whole thing. Oh, yeah. Like if you're any kind of public figure or politician or celebrity or whatever, like something you did 10, 15 years ago can come, I mean, obviously legal things 100%, right? But I'm saying, like, if it was just like a decision you made or a tweet you made or things like that, like people are getting a lot of flack for maybe a mistake that they made years ago, and how that might bleed over into everyday life is that maybe because we know something about a certain person and it was X amount of years ago and we don't let it go. So then maybe internally we can't let go of things ourselves. I don't know. It's just where it's all swirling around.
It's interesting because you start thinking about when you deal with people. Think of a time where you've known somebody or seen somebody and you just like hate them right up front. Like you don't know why.
Logan.
that may be true.
Yeah.
One of my very best friends. We had daughters the same age, and they went to this school, and every time I showed up, the mom of this girl that has since become such dear friends, but she was like the ultimate PTA mom, involved in everything, absolutely gorgeous, just like checked all the boxes of perfect. And her husband, he was on an infomercial, and like they were well off financially, they had done well, and it just seemed they drove the cool car, everything. And when I first like started seeing them frequently at all these events, I had disdain for them, and I could not tell you why, other than I was just, I don't know, to a jealous rage or something. I don't know. But then at an event, we're standing there and the women are doing their thing, and it's just the guys kind of like, we ended up herding into this little group, and lo and behold, who ends up standing next to me? The guy I cannot stand.
Yeah.
But I'm a nice guy and he's a nice guy. So we kind of like exchange some pleasantries, and then we start talking about our daughters and the performance that they were doing. And I kind of like him. He's kind of like not a jerk and not who I thought he was.
Preconceived notions are fading.
And guys, he became one of my best friends.
That's funny.
Like, I love this guy. And they live up in Washington. And every time we go up, there's a very small select amount of people that I still go and like see. But we make sure when we're up there that we go see them. And so the reason I share that story is because as you're dealing with maybe this inability to forgive yourself or others, what I've found is that connection to other people allows us to love and to connect better, but it also allows us to forgive ourselves. Connection is the answer. If you're stuck in depression, if you're stuck in anxiety, if you're stuck in all these areas, I'm not saying that you have to go out and start a podcast and get in front of 1 million people. One individual that can help relate to you. They don't even have to be somebody that like always constantly builds you up, but it's somebody that you can laugh with, that you can talk with, and that you can kind of open up to. Suddenly you start to realize that you're not a bad person. And I deal with, this is one of the tracks when I'm dealing with a client that's really, really hard on themselves. The first thing I have to do is help convince them that they're not a bad person.
He's talking about me, by the way. That's all I can do. It's just add a few little.
We need to tag team that.
What happens is they look at their lives and they're like, I yell at my kids all the time. This is a great example. We all yell at our kids, right?
Yeah.
If you peel back and we start going deep into why are you yelling at your kids? Is it because you hate them? No.
Of course not.
No. Why? Why do you yell at your kids?
Well, I don't really know. You're angry about something else and they make a mistake and you just lose your temper because.
I'll bet you money. Here's what you're struggling to articulate.
They won't clean after you tell them to clean.
Yeah.
But even in that, I want you guys both to peel back your own layers. It's because you want them to be better than you were.
Oh, easy.
Yeah.
Is that true?
I think like they already are though.
They are.
Yeah.
But when they do something stupid.
Your daughter way is.
When our kids right? When our kids do something stupid, we want to quash that out because we know that our stupidity made us not be as good as we could have been.
Yeah.
And so the root cause of what makes us yell or frustrated, think about when we argue with our wives and it's like, over stupid things. And
it's always over stupid things.
Usually it's not because you're actually mad at her for doing something bad. It's because you're trying to turn her back to see your point of view. And your 100%. Point of view is that, gosh, if we didn't do that, we won't screw things up like I've screwed things up.
Yeah.
The reason that I want you guys to walk through that is because when we get to the core, the actual core of why we're jerks is because we want people to not make the same mistakes we are. It's a good, noble cause. It's that our execution of doing said thing totally sucks.
It's because we don't have the skill set to be able to explain. To me, that's my thing is I don't have the skill set to articulate to them what I want to say.
But again,
I don't have that ability.
Going back to that heart of why, that's the important part that you recognize. Your intentions are good. Therefore, you're a good person. You just need to work on your execution. Now, that's where a coach can come in or hanging out, going to groups, going to things that can help it teach you those skill sets. Absolutely. But in forgiving ourselves, this is the moment where you step back and go, I am a good guy. At least my intention of what I want in those outcomes, in those moments that I suck and that I screw up and that I don't say the right thing. The core of who I am, I do mean well.
Yeah.
That changes the whole mental conversation. Now we can go back to that over and over again. If you can keep reminding yourself that I mean well, I just need to learn some skills on how to execute well, your life's trajectory can change.
Well, and the cool thing is too, is that when you do have that inkling of like you did do something correctly, it's almost like a little bit intoxicating, right?
Yeah.
And I don't share this story to like, oh, look at me, I did this right. But like, I've been working with Brockbank. He was on the show. That guy is going places.
He's a rock star.
And he's been similar. He's kind of
when he has his shirt on, he usually has it off.
Yeah, he's gonna forget. Dude, if I had an 8-pack, I would never wear a shirt. But anyway, so he's been helping me on. He does. He's basically a therapist while also like a personal trainer and a bunch of stuff all in one. And he's been helping me with a lot of different things. And a conversation that he and I had yesterday in a session led me to think everything differently through the rest of the day. My daughter, she's 8 years old, and she is already showing some pretty intense signs of legitimate anxiety struggles. And there's times, even in my frustration, even being a mental health advocate, and even with all of my experience, there's times where I'm like, can you stop? Like, because like I'm overstimulated. And like, that's obviously the worst expression that you like, the worst possible way to respond to an 8-year-old having an anxiety attack. She is absolutely terrified of like thunderstorms, lightning, crazy wind. And what did we have last night?
Yeah, big time.
And I could see, we got some friends coming over in the morning, so we're getting some things straightened up or whatever. And it's doors are rattling,
She's terrified.
Yeah, but we've told her to relax before in the past. And I could see, I catch a glimpse at her, in her eyes that she's starting to get that well up. And she's very mature for an 8-year-old. And I see it in her, and I'm going back to doing what I'm doing. And then I see her I see it welling up in her. And so she's not reacting the way that she would normally, like starting to freak out. And I started having this feeling of like, is it because I've pretty much told her to relax or told her to calm down? And so I'm watching my 8-year-old bottle up her emotion. And I'm like, that is not good. Like, that's so not good. So I literally sit down, get to her level. I sit down on the ottoman, and I'm like, her name's Liv. I'm like, Liv, come here. And she like just literally leans into me for a hug. And then it's like everything melts, right?
Yeah.
Your 8-year-old, my firstborn, my daughter, like daughter, she just melts. And I was like, sweetie, what's going on? And she starts just talking to me about the wind and how it's scary. And then my wife comes over, and so then it's just kind of this sweet moment where we're talking about all the good thing that the winds do. I'm like, it blows seeds around for flowers and trees, and it helps push, pollution out of the air. It helps bring in rain. And so we start talking about all these good things. Then we also talk about how we don't live in Florida. We live in Utah, so it's not going to be that crazy. But it was a moment where it could have gone to her having a really hard time going to bed.
Right.
We had this sweet little, dad, mom, daughter moment, because I was in the mindset because of a conversation I had earlier in the day to see my daughter where she was at and sit down and meet her where she was at, instead of you're freaking out, me over, projecting my insecurities. And so I love that you said that. This is almost like a little therapy session.
And see, and I'm totally opposite. I'd be having a big speaker, and then I'd put it in her room.
You're so
push play.
But no, it's even we got to the point where, the anxiety she has is we live in a townhome right now, and I'm like, sweetie, I was like, we've got the so-and-so's houses right here, and we've got the so-and-so's houses right here. I was like, so we're actually really lucky. I said, we only have 2 outside walls. I was like, so if anybody's house is going to blow away, it's going to be theirs first. And then we got to the more fun side as the walls come down. And I'm like, you know what the wind also does? And I was like, it drops houses on the Wicked Witch of the East. And she loves Dorothy and all that stuff. So she starts laughing. But I never looked at it that way, of when you peel back the layers of, it's just because, not because we don't think that they're good enough. It's because we have those insecurities in ourselves that we want them to be better.
Yeah, even and I want to acknowledge, like, I'm really proud of you for handling it that way. It's hard, but in that anxiety that we start to feel that frustration build up. Think about, I've struggled with some anxiety in the past, and my daughter also went through anxiety, like really severe. And when she was about that age and kind of in junior high and stuff, and kind of it got really severe, and I remember getting mad at her over her anxiety. Here she is, like same situation. And when I go back, the reason I got mad was because I didn't want her to struggle like I struggled.
Yeah, no, I get that.
Right. And it was through that process that I started to realize, like, okay, I mean well. I just suck at being a dad. But I mean well. I want the best for her. I just didn't know how to tell her, like, stop it. Like, or rather, what I should have done is sit down and work through it with her, like you've illustrated. So I hope your listeners can take away a little bit on that of like, all right, when your kid is doing things or going through things or triggering for you, maybe just take a step back and look at why you're triggered. Probably because you don't want them to go through the same stupid process and struggles that you went through. So now how do you wish you would have had somebody show up for you in those moments,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then maybe they just sit down and walk through it and talk through it with love rather than yelling, and which does nothing but create more anxiety.
Mine is all about like the self-inflicted stuff where you see them and you're like, I did that. Like, will you please, like, you have a girlfriend in high school. I'm like, buddy, you're just spending money on another person's wife. I'm like, dude, just have fun. You don't need this drama in your life and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, I hear myself talking and I'm like, I'm a big jerk right now. But in my mind, just like you said, I'm like, I've been there. I know how this feels. It's not a good thing.
Yeah.
Like what you're like, I know what's going to happen here shortly. And I'm like, can you please just use your head? But I can't say that. But I can can go on a walk. We can go work out, and he slowly like will tell me what's going on, and then I'm like, okay, do you think that's smart? Like I start asking questions now instead of lecturing, and then he gets the answer for himself.
See, I like that. Like I've found that when I ask my daughter questions, or my son, he's 6, he really cares about Legos right now. That's about it.
By the way, I love your children.
Yeah, they're pretty cool.
But your daughter, dead serious, his daughter like does a journal, like a heartfelt journal.
My daughter journals.
Like when I say she's better than she's better than Logan, she's better than
Logan. She will write down her feelings and bring it to me and my wife on a piece of paper and talk to us about why she felt a certain way. And
like Logan and his wife have done a good job.
That's awesome. I think it's majority my wife.
Don't sell yourself short. That's the crap that bugs me. Like he does that all the time. My social media account.
But one thing that what were we talking about?
I have no idea.
Yeah, no, I love these conversations because this is what I was going to touch on.
Sorry.
No, it was pertinent to what you were saying though. But I think that as fathers, right? You want the best for your kids, right? You literally you'd lay down in a puddle of mud so they could walk across it, right? Like without hesitation. Most of us would just kind of like throw them across the puddle now, right? But my point being is that I see now the older I get, it's like with every passing year, I have more empathy and understanding for my dad.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that guy raised 7 kids while, job hopping when he got shafted because didn't have a degree because you didn't need it at that time. And then some young kid comes in with a degree that can pay $30,000-$40,000 less. Oh, we downsized. And then, I mean, the guy was insanely huge supporter of everything that we do. But the older I've gotten, the more I've learned a little bit more about his life and the immense struggles that he had growing up and the immense, trauma that he endured. And the fact that I sit here today being insanely supported by that man and none of the stuff that he went through ever came close to even being a part of my life. It was like, is a massive, it means a lot to me because like you said, it just leads me to having more love and respect for my dad and giving him more empathy and more of a, I don't even say a pass because the guy doesn't do anything wrong. I'm saying that like maybe it helps me understand myself a little bit better of kind of like, I'm never going to push on my kids what was the hardest parts of my life. I want them to be better than that. I want them, not that it's their choice if they have a mental struggle or not, but that experience of learning more about my dad, as a kid and then an adolescent and then a teenager and then a young adult and realizing that this is the first time he's ever done this too. This is the first time he's ever been this age. Gives me a lot more understanding and empathy of what it means to be a dad.
So true, though.
And so then that at leads at times makes me give myself a little bit more grace. I'm kind of like, okay, well, this is the first time I've ever been a dad to an extremely intelligent 8-year-old.
No, but like my dad, like when I left to go to Houston and I got home, he was 38, 39. Mm-hmm. And then when he became a grandpa, he was 42. And I'm like,
you're 45.
I know. I'm 44. I'll be 45 next month.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what the crap? Like he was so old. You know what I mean?
Right.
He was so mature. He had everything going for him. Like, like he had it down.
Yeah.
No, he didn't.
Well, I'm remembering like I have this, I don't know why, but I have this vivid memory of I was in Toys R Us with my dad. I'm 5 or 6. And I was at that perfect height where I run up and like to like be next to my dad. I like I used to like hold on to his leg. Right. And I remember this vivid memory where I run up and I grab onto this leg. That's not my dad. Right. But it's funny is I like to, when I go to the store, I like to take my kids with me. Like I like to, like, one or the other or both, whatever, give mom a break. Right. But there was a moment the other day where my boy came running up and he had grabbed my leg, and it just was like this, like I got taken back to Toys R Us or whatever. And I'm like, holy crap, my dad was in his 30s when that happened. I was like, I'm in my 30s. And I was like, you're me, I'm you, I'm him. Like it was this whole thing. But it just kind of goes back to this, like, as men, as fathers, as husbands, as friends, as brothers, and that stuff. Like, I think the more that we realize that we need to give ourselves more grace, and that there is a root cause for 99% of the reasons why we do things, that it's not always, well, I'm a bad guy and I need to change. I think that's what's helped me a lot.
And I think that in that is the answer to the question that you've been asking, is how do we forgive ourselves? And being able to look and see, there's a saying that says understanding begats understanding. Like my one major, like, big flaw that I struggled for years with was I love driving. I'm a fast driver.
Oh, yeah.
And road rage, like, used to get me. So I'm driving fast already. I promise. I am not a slow guy on the freeway. And when you start riding my bumper, oh man.
Oh yeah.
I like, that's how Brad turns into the Incredible Hulk. Like, start smashing cars. And so I realized this is a big flaw of mine.
Yeah.
And that if I can tell a story about that person, I said, man, I'm driving fast. So if they're riding my bumper, they must have some sort of an emergency. And I started saying, they've got to get to the hospital because they just got news that someone's, their daughter, their mom, or somebody is there. I better get out of their way. And I was happy to do that because I'm a helper. Like, I want to give, right?
Yeah.
And so it would take my rage and turn it into, I'm being helpful. Now, of course, sometimes you get guys that drive past you, and as they speed past you because you get over, and then they flip you off, and they're
tell you're number one.
Yeah, exactly. Your
brain
brain obviously goes, well, that's clearly not and you want to engage.
Yeah.
And I had to start an additional piece of, but what if they're just that angry because they're trying to get somewhere to something, and don't let it ruin my day. Right.
Ooh, I've let it ruin my day so many times.
Times. But as I started out implementing that practice, it changed. Now, on that same premise, when you get mad at yourself, and going back to what we've talked about, finding that core that you mean well, like, if you can give somebody else forgiveness, if you can extend that, like, once you understand their situation, you're like, oh my gosh. Just like my friend, when I sat down and finally started to understand him and realize what a good guy he was, if you can do the same for yourself, realize that you mean well, realize that you are a good person at the core, even when your execution sucks, you can forgive yourself for the things that you do that aren't how you want them to turn out. You could have done it better, coulda, shoulda, woulda. But man, give yourself a little bit of grace and know that you're not a complete project yet.
So I know we're wrapping up, but mine is more guilt. Mine is guilt of not providing what I was hoping to be able to provide for my family by this time. So it's like reality versus expectation.
Okay.
And so that's where I hurt. That's where I'm like when we were talking about this, like, I'm stuck in the gap. So no matter what it is, all of a sudden I get to where I thought I was supposed to be like 5 years ago. All of a sudden it's not enough. And I don't know how to get out of that. I don't know. Like, I'm appreciative of what I have. I'm appreciative of where I am, but it's still like, it's not enough. And not financially. Like, financially, dude, like, I don't know if I'll ever like we're check to check right now just because 6 kids. We've had kids in the hospital, multiple, for extended stays and stuff like that, and it's just medical bills take so much out of
pile up.
But mine is more of like my house. Like, I was expecting to be able to take my kids to Disneyland and be able to do this and be able to do this, and I would like to take my wife on somewhere to eat nice, just me and her.
Right.
And so it's more of like expectations versus reality, and I feel guilty that I can't give her what I was hoping to be able to give her as a loving husband and father and stuff like that. How to get out of that? Sorry, I know we were just wrapping up, but all of a sudden I'm just
question,
like,
dude.
That's a great question. And I think it's one that the listeners probably are all hurting and like, yeah, how? And while there's not a like, oh, here's your algorithm, here's your equation. I think going back again, what's your intention? Do you work hard?
mm-hmm.
Are you showing up as much as you can?
Mm-hmm.
Are you desiring those things for your family?
Yeah.
You're doing all that you can. Now, why it hasn't come together yet, there's a whole nother podcast on
it's hard to start a brand by itself.
But look at how much is coming together. And I know for your listeners, it's going to be a little hard because they don't get all the benefit of seeing what's actually behind the scenes, what's coming together. But if you continue to believe and continue to work towards those things, I personally subscribe to a world where if you stay focused and you're doing everything that you can to build that eventually, I can't imagine a situation or a scenario where somebody stayed even to scientific wonders, things that like were impossible that are now possible,
mm-hmm.
but they spend a lifetime. But then towards the end of their lifetime, guess what? Their hunches, their things that they were like thought, well, maybe it came together because they had spent so much time and energy focusing on the solution.
Mm-hmm.
And in that same light, with where you're at, I personally get the benefit of knowing what's going on behind the scenes, and I know it's coming.
Yeah.
And I'm excited for your listeners to be able to be kind of on that journey watching you. And if they listen closely to episodes that are coming up in the future as we go through some of these transitions, they're going to see like, holy crap.
It's really cool to see.
Tyson has it coming together, all the energy, the effort, the hard work, it's paying off. And you guys, that's a law upon which the outcomes are predicated. Like there are certain laws. If you want great relationships, guess what? You got to be nice and work and put those things in to make a good relationship come out.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to be financially sound, there are laws that you have to follow that equate to finances coming together and having that in your life.
Mm-hmm.
I had a boss. I'll share one last quick story. He was probably one of the meanest people I've ever known. And he was crazy wealthy, had more money than I could ever expect. And growing up, I grew up in the Mormon church, and there's this doctrine that's taught that if you're righteous and if you follow the teachings and you do what God wants you to do, he'll bless you. And I figured that meant financially, I'm going to be in great shape. So I did. I followed. And aside from my pornography issue, which I always said, oh, that's why. That's my out. That's why I'm not getting financially there. Because everybody said Brad Brockbank's going to be a multimillionaire. But what I discovered is that the reason that I wasn't making money or becoming a multimillionaire was because I wasn't following the laws. Every penny I got, I was out spending, trying to look like I was financially wealthy. And then we'd struggle till the next paycheck, and I'd go out and buy things and trying to look. I didn't follow the laws upon which that success is predicated. So
I like that a lot.
In that same light, right? Like you're putting in the time, the effort, the energy, and it's coming together. It's just a matter of time now.
Mm-hmm.
So stick to it. Don't end up being the gold mine that sold out all their stuff and then the new people bought it. And 3 feet, they were 3 feet from hitting the largest gold vein in the history of California. Why? Because they gave up. So wherever you're at in your journey, you may be 3 feet for gold, and maybe you're 50 feet from gold. Maybe you're 1,000 feet from gold, but don't give up because I can't imagine how much you learn in that 1,000 feet of digging that all of a sudden you start putting things together and like little things crop up and all of a sudden you learn a new indicator that, hey, there might actually be gold down this direction. And soon enough, all that learning, all that struggling, all that effort, it comes together and boom, you get what you've been going after.
I love that.
I really like it.
One thing that I'll let you think on this for a second, because I asked I asked a guest and put him on the spot. We always like to leave listeners and people who are watching with a challenge, and when we have someone on the show, we ask them to kind of think about it. So think about that for a second, because I wanted to share one. I'm an analogy guy, and sometimes they're super corny, but I'm also
Sometimes
they're always really corny. But I'm also a construction guy, and my brother and I, we work in excavation, and you're talking about this whole process, right? And the only thing I kept thinking of was like the process that it takes to take a dirt field to like a beautiful building, right? People may not see the beauty in architecture and like, a Chipotle, but like when you see what goes into building the building, like we're the guys that come in first, and we've got a dirt field,
Right.
and it's not like, oh, you got to lay the foundation. Like, no, it happens before that. We're having to tie in the water lines, the electrical, conduits. We have to tie in the sewer lines and the storm drain system. We have to build all of that, and that's all underground. Yeah. And then you backfill on top of all of that, and then you're building the foundation. And the foundation starts out as this muddy, sloppy concrete mess. But then over time, as you're working it with the trowels and you're working with all this stuff, it gets harder and it gets firmer, and then it turns into like a work of art almost. There's some concrete guys that are insane. And then everything starts building on top of that. But before the parking lot can go in, it's this muddy, dirty, nasty mess, especially right now.
Right.
But then as soon as that's all compacted and that's all worked over, and then you got this nice, crisp parking lot, and then you're painting the lines, and then you're putting the sign up, and then the doors are open, and now you have this beautiful restaurant that's making money. But it was this dirty, nasty, you can look at my truck, it's just covered in dirt and mud all the time, because we're constantly building up these things. And that's the analogy that I was making of like, to get to this beautiful building that we want to be, this beautiful version of ourselves or our businesses or whatever, it takes a lot of freaking mud to get there.
Absolutely.
And eventually that mud hardens and becomes something beautiful, and it kind of calluses. I feel like becoming callous is a little bit necessary for some of this stuff, but callous with empathy, I guess.
Yeah.
So I know there's a lot of blue collar guys that listen to this, so I like to throw those in there sometimes, because like I had one guy message me about a truck analogy. He's like, dude, that made perfect sense. So
no, it did, and I like that one a lot.
That's where my brain just went now, of like, there's just all the muck you have to literally go through before you have something. We're building a Chipotle right now, if you didn't. Nice. But so if you did have one challenge to leave our listeners or anybody, what based off of what we talked about, or just in general, like a message you have.
No, I know the perfect one, because I think there's a lot of dads listening. And I think that like, I wish I would have done better. I'm going to challenge each of them, something that I did with my daughter. And I was lucky. I worked from home, so I had a little bit more ability to do this. Every week I had two daughters. I have three daughters now, but the one's 5. So my two older daughters, one's 22 and the other one's 20. And when they were in junior high, I just started, like, I'd go pick them up from school. I'd take them at lunch. We'd go to this greasy little Mexican restaurant, same stupid restaurant. We got the same stupid burrito every year for 3 years while they were in the junior high up there. And my daughter, with like the really severe anxiety, said, Dad, that saved me. And I know that not everybody can just peel off and go pick up your kids. That some of you work a lot further from just being able to do that. But if there is a way that you can find a way to connect with your kids and take them, and I made 100% certain to get my kids back late on purpose. They got back late from our lunches, so that, and then, one day I went into the office with them to sign them back in, and I said, hey, I'm really sorry. I always bring them back late. It's just a thing I'm doing on purpose, so they know it's important, like that I value them, not value the get them back on time. Mm-hmm. And the lady said, oh my gosh, if every father did what you did. She said, your kids are some of the best behaved kids in this school. And it was because there was connection. At least I think. My daughter, if you ask her, she'll tell you it's because I knew that Dad cared. And the way that she knew I cared was because I took her to a restaurant called Muchas Gracias. It's literally like a Beto's here that we have, but it's greasy little Mexican restaurant. And we got these bean and cheese burritos, and we'd sit there and talk for 45 minutes, and then I'd take her back to school. Yeah. So an hour out of my day each week that was very, very well spent. So my challenge is, if there's any way, shape, or form, maybe it's got to be on a Saturday, maybe it's a Sunday, do some one-on-one with your kids, because I promise you, every ounce of time, effort, and energy you put into that will pay you dividends, and it will help you with your mental health. It will make you feel like you're a better dad. It will make you feel like you're putting in that effort and able to maybe forgive yourself for some of the shortcomings.
I'm going to do that.
I love that. No, I love
Challenge
that.
accepted.
Yeah, dude. Brad, thank you so much. This has been super
Bez.
insightful. I love this.
This was a really good episode.
Yeah, it was. So thank
But
you guys.
Logan didn't cry.
I didn't cry. Well, I felt it, but I held it back. But thank you guys all so much for listening. Check back in next week. New episodes every Monday. Check out mountainops.com. Like we said, we're going to continue to push this because Mountain Ops has they're a business that is built on some very, very good core values. Everything that you buy on mountainops.com, not only are you going to get 20% off with codes DADBODS, but they're going to provide a meal for a family in need through the Operation Conquer Hunger. So thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Bye. Thank you so much for listening, guys. It means the world to us. If you have a chance, please give us a 5-star review, as well as write something a little pretty in there so that we know that you know that we know that you care. Anyway, have a great day, guys. See, I can't do it.
Dude, that was good. I liked that. You can't redo it without laughing. That was good.